Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of HCTalk. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley. Our guest on the program today is Doug Schroeder, who's the Director of Programs at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. How are you doing today, Doug?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd been talking with you briefly in the past, probably a while back, and then here most recently, just wanting to see if you would come out on the program and share your life with us here in Harvey County. I think a lot of people know you or know of you. You've been in service-oriented career for a very long time, so there's a lot of relationship building that happens with that. Yeah. Just really appreciative that you've decided to come out here and brave it. So normally we'll just get right into it. As everybody knows that watches the program, we try to just get a brief bio as far as what you'd like to share with the audience, as far as where you grew up, maybe if you want to share about your family, you share about your family as far as brothers, sisters, mom, dad, married, kids, whatever the case may be. Okay. And then just how you found yourself, I guess to start with, being a police officer in Hesston, because that's where you started your law enforcement career.
It is. So even before that, I was a senior in high school, and I knew that I could only do that for 1 year. Like, I needed to move on, right? So it was about halfway through. This is kind of a funny story that I tell once in a while. I was kind of halfway through my senior year, and Al Gore had not invented the internet yet.
Yeah. So, oh, no, now you're dating yourself.
I know. And so we had this floppy drive that had a bunch of questions on it that was designed to say, hey, this is what you would like to do as a profession. This is what you would not like. This is what you'd be good at. This is what you would not be good at, right? So I sat down, take that test. At the end of it, it spits out the number one thing is a teacher. Now, I'll tell you, I was very naive at the time of what a teacher's job is. Yeah. And I kind of thought, a static environment, the same classroom every day, the same people every day. I'm not really feeling it.
Yeah.
So, and then fast forward, I'm adjunct now. But anyway, So then I looked at the list of things that I would not like, that I would not excel at, and number one on that list was police officer. So to this day, I don't know if it was a problem with the program or if I'm just that kind of person that I want to swim upstream. I don't know.
I love it. Yeah, so that's interesting. Taking a test and then finding out that would be the least likely thing that you might enjoy or that you would excel at, and then that be something that you've made into a lifelong career.
Absolutely. Right after that, I did some job shadowing, some riding around right here in Newton, and got to know some of the officers that I still keep in touch with today. And I just thought that's the dynamic, ever-changing environment that I want to exist in. So after that, went to community college, went to Hutch, got an associate's degree, deathly afraid of student loans. And having an October birthday, I jumped right into it right after that. Began my career at Halstead. And I was there for about 1.25 years. During that time, I met a deputy that made a really strong impression on me to this day. And it was a strong impression because I was a new guy in a small town in Harvey County, didn't know anything, hadn't even been to Basic Academy yet. There was a long wait at that time to get into Basic Academy. And a deputy by the name of Kurt Ford called me on the radio. He wanted to meet me. So we met up in the park, and I just thought somebody that just went out of their way to introduce themselves to a nobody, I felt really good. So when I had a chance to go to Hesston to serve with Kurt, I jumped all over it. And that's why I was only in Halstead for a short period of time.
Okay, so I'm you didn't say, I'm not asking for TMI or anything, but okay. I'm assuming you're a local guy then. I mean, were you from? I mean, you said you shadowed with Newton, so I'm guessing high school Newton or what?
No, I actually went to high school in Gossel, Gossel. Grew up in Marion County.
I did not know that. Okay, yeah, so I'm learning something new about you already. Yeah, so you're a local man.
I am local.
Yeah. So then did the Gossel thing, and then of course came to realize that law enforcement would be something that you'd be interested in. Got onto the mean streets of Halstead, Kansas right away. And you mentioned Kurt Ford. I got to say, in the law enforcement community, there is not very many people that I've interviewed that do not speak very highly of Kurt and all that he did and all the impacts that he made with not only people in the law enforcement community, but just people in the broader community. I mean, I got to say, in my life, I was joking with you before the program and said, I think I remember your first day at Hesston, which may not have been the first day, but you know, I had a real affinity for Kurt as the chief of police in Hesston as a youth, right? Being able to look up to the man. And then also another officer there that did some mentorship with me and was you know, they're just, I think that police force was very focused on reaching the youth at a time in which maybe that wasn't necessarily like a law enforcement priority, maybe.
Yes.
And from there, I just remember going up one day and pounding on the door to the police department, which at that point in time was attached to the EMS and City Hall and the whole thing there. And as he opens up the door, there you said. And so I don't know if it was the first day or whatever, but I remember it was around the first time. So when you just, did Kurt come to you and say, hey, there's an opening in Hesston, or were you like, man, if I could go work for that guy, that's where I want to be?
So that was the thought in my head, if I could work for him. But no, I'd actually in January of 98, I went to DARE instructor school, and there was a Hesston officer there, Brian Holliday. And he was going through DARE instructor school as well. And we just hit it off, you know, both from Harvey County, and spent some time together. And by the end of that 2-week training, he said, hey, we've got a brand new opening. Love to have you come and visit with Kurt. And I was like, yeah, that's no brainer. Let's win.
Yeah.
You know, when and where. And he said, people say a lot of good things about Kurt. And you know what? They're true. They're true. You know, he was both a cop's cop, but he did it the right way, you know, through relationships. So that's how I went over to Hesston.
Very cool. Okay, so upon transferring to Hesston and just learning the ropes, but at that point in time, you had already gone through the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, and
correct.
You did some DARE instruction, obviously. Did you go into being a DARE officer there, or were you just...
It was part of my duties, at Hesston.
Okay, so automatically involved in the youth of the community.
Yes.
And hoping to chart a better path for them through awareness.
Right out of the gate.
To try to keep them, prevent them. Well, I don't think they call it DARE anymore. I think they still have something similar, but at that time, if you're old like us, I'm not to say we're old, but yeah. Okay, so then when you were, I don't know, a few years in, because obviously I want to ask kind of what you felt like when you first became a law enforcement officer, whether it was really like what you thought it was going to be. But after a couple years of serving as an officer, where were you at? Did you ever have second thoughts, or was there ever a moment of clarity after, a few years where you're like, this is exactly where I want to be doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, it was the latter. Everything that I learned, I enjoyed it, and it just kind of fueled me to want to learn more. I'm one of those people that I thrive when I'm challenged. I like the challenge. I seek the challenge. And so that's how I felt. And I got a lot of good opportunities there to become a instructor in several areas of law enforcement in my early years. And I think just that and learning that community policing perspective is the reason why I was a candidate when Kurt left for police chief.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the police chief. What would make you want to be a police chief versus, because that's more of an administrative duty, correct?
Yeah.
So how long were you a Hesston police officer before the job opening came available and you decided, you know what, these are big shoes to fill, but I want to try to do that?
Yeah, so about 3 years. I started in Hesston February of 2008. I'm sorry, February of 1998. I became police chief in July or June of 2021. So I had about 3 years with Kurt. And so another sidebar funny story. I find it funny, at least. 2001, Kurt decided that the family was going to move to Colorado, opening up the position. And again, through no real credit to myself other than just being a sponge on others, the council approached me and wanted me to consider taking the job. In 2001, my oldest was born, my firstborn, and she was a little one. She was 3 pounds something, and she was a preemie. So my head was spinning. I was a new dad. I had this little baby that was totally healthy, but we didn't know at the time. So I said, I can't. I was 25 years old, and I said, I just can't right now. So they said, well, would you be on the hiring board to interview? And I said, well, yeah, pick your next boss. That'd be a terrible thing, right?
Right.
So I did, and we met one night, took the top 3 candidates, consensus top 3, and after the third one walked out, council member just turned to me and said, what would it take to reconsider? And we were probably 4 months down the road, 4 or 5 months down the road. I knew that my family situation was more stable, and it was at that part I said, yeah, I'd like to do that, with the caveat of I don't know what I don't know. And so I was also able to kind of map out certain training programs and schools that I was then able to attend to, really bring up that administrative end of it. And yeah, there's a lot more administrative stuff to being a police chief. I mean, higher up in rank anywhere you go, and it becomes more administrative and less hands-on. But Hesston, with the population it is, I think we have 8 full-time officers there. So I was knee-deep in all the investigations and things that I like to do. Things that problem solve. That being challenged part was still being dealt with.
Met. That need was met. Yeah. And
Yeah.
You mentioned something. So for, people that maybe listen to this program that are not necessarily as familiar with Harvey County or Hesston, we're dealing with a town about 3,000, maybe a little over population. So in a smaller policing community like that, is it more of just a dual role usually? Like you're the chief, but the idea that you don't go out and patrol or that you don't respond to calls or things like that is kind of a misnomer?
That'd definitely be a misnomer. So we use the term "we" in law enforcement. We use the term "working chief," not to say big cities chiefs don't work. They work, but they don't wear all the hats.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge to wear all the hats. But it was a one that I really enjoyed partaking in.
So, and then how long were you the chief of police there in Hesston?
So just over 20 years.
20 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Left there in July of 2021.
Okay. So, yeah, that wasn't too long ago. That's
Nope.
just like a couple years ago. Okay. So, during this lengthy career as the chief of police, I always like to ask people two sides to the coin. One is, can you recall a time or something that you can pull away from that to give with the audience of just one of the best things during that time that you were able to either contribute or just a very open-ended question. During that 20 years, what's one of the best things that you think that you were able to experience during that time?
So I would certainly say one of my best experiences came on the tail end of tragedy, and that is, I'm trying. I need to be vague here a little bit, just so people don't start putting names and things together. But for all of the 20 years that I was at Hesston, I was also our child forensic interviewer. So all child victims of physical and or sexual abuse, I would interview them here at the Heart to Heart Advocacy Center. And it was designed that way. That's not something that a lot of people want to do. But we kind of had this system where I would do the interviews and then hand off for the investigations, because we could kind of keep it separated that way, and it worked for us. So there was a case that young person came forward. We identified a couple other victims. We went to court. The court was settled. The perpetrator is still behind bars. And afterwards, the victims wanted to have a picture with me in the courtroom. And still gives me chills, because just being of young age in an environment talking about something you don't want to talk about, the worst things that you've ever experienced. And then they wanted to take a picture with me afterwards. It was pretty cool.
Well, I mean,
pretty cool. And it's really, I tell people that because that's the influence a police officer can have on someone. We'll both go home and turn on the news tonight, right? And you'll see the negative influence that a police officer can have on someone, no doubt. But I've felt many of the positives.
Yeah.
And that's definitely one.
Yeah, and that's a tough situation. When you think about a youth that has been in a horrible situation, and then for you to have to sit through that and know that you're there to advocate for them, and then like you said, for them to be able to you're their hero. I mean, you really are.
Yeah.
You're their safe person. You're their hero. You're the person. You're the knight right there at that point in time. That's just helping them.
Yeah.
And yeah. That's okay. So to switch it over on the other side of the coin, what I always like to ask is during that time, what would be what you would consider one of the greatest challenges?
Challenges. Sometimes in smaller towns, you don't have unlimited budgets. So we really had to be good stewards of what we had. And we were still very well off in comparison to some other cities and towns, right? But it's certainly not unlimited. So that had its problems. We were always focused on community education and did a couple of drug programs for the community and for the schools, through DARE and various things. So, and then I remember waves of even the fraud and the targeting of our elderly citizens, scams. When that really got going, again, kind of took the internet to spin some of that up, but. Yeah, so those were among the challenges. It's also, I think it takes a special person to want to be a police officer in that size city, because if you're just a person that wants to run and gun, as they say, make 5 arrests a night and be 8, 9 reports deep by the time your shift is done, a small town's not where you're going to do it, But if you want to have an impact on your community, a small town is where you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it appeals to maybe a smaller group of people, and so personnel was always kind of, in law enforcement, the grass is greener somewhere else too, right? And so that's always been a struggle in law enforcement in general.
In general,
we were maybe a little better off than the national average. But it still didn't mean that it wasn't, being down one person when you have 8 is a big part of your group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being down 2 people when you have 50 isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with my son, obviously, who's considering, that may be a field that he would be interested in. And I have many friends who are in law enforcement, and they say, one of the challenges that they feel is that, you think that you're going to get into this and it's going to be always, like you had mentioned, I don't know how you said it, but it's not always going to be pedal to the metal. It's not always going to be, what you would consider, arresting the bad guy. That there's long periods of time in there where you're just out there in the community, you're out there policing, community policing as we call it, building relationships, and then even having to deal with small things like neighbor disputes because one person, so there's a lot that goes into policing as far as that goes. I guess you did the chief for 20 years. So at what point did you decide, hey, I've fulfilled everything that I want to do here, and then I know that you moved on from that to do other things. So kind of give me a little bit about when you came upon that knowledge, you started to think about that, and then from there you decided to do something different. And what did you do? Yeah,
so even during that 20 years of being police chief, we had our local challenges, but as I said earlier, I'm always one that wants a challenge. So during that 20 years, I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree from Central Christian in McPherson.
Okay.
Loved that so much, didn't want to stop. Got my master's degree from Fort Hays State. And I guess between that, I did a command leadership school out of University of Northwestern, and just ate that up so much so that I'm still kind of operating in that realm. As soon as I was done with my master's, I began adjunct in a couple of area colleges in the criminal justice departments. I've done some classes for Sterling back at Central Christian, and most recently, this last year, I've been doing some adjunct instruction at KU in their newly formed criminal justice major. So it's only a couple years old, and it's going really strong, and I'm fortunate to be able to have those contacts. And that's really about, again, I like the challenge, but I also have a desire to pay something forward, right? I don't want to take my knowledge, my experiences, and just someday take them to the grave. People need that. So I've enjoyed that. So wrapping back around to what your question actually was. So in 2001, I left Hesston, and it was for the challenge. And the challenge I thought was a pretty significant one. I applied and was hired by the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, KC Post. I think we have letters or acronyms for everything in law enforcement, if you didn't know. So the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. And what we did there is we regulate the licensing of law enforcement officers. So if they committed some sort of conduct that was outside of the Training Act or set aside by our Kansas administrative regulations, then our commission of 12 members would meet and decide on an action like revoking their license, suspending it, maybe reprimand in certain situations. So that was very rewarding, because now I feel like that my staff there, we had an influence on more than just area officers, more than I had at Hesston, and really all 8,300 current officers in Kansas. And also had staff that was tasked with maintaining a database that tracks all of their training. Kansas officers have to have 40 hours of continuing ed per year. And so that database held about 35,000 past and present officers. So kind of two sides of the coin. They're investigators due to conduct that would violate the Training Act, and the other side is data management and data entry.
Okay, so what was the most challenging thing about that job? Because you go outside of your wheelhouse. Well, let me back up here. What did you study when you went to McPherson, and then obviously at Fort Hays? What did you study there? So what are your degrees in?
Criminal justice. Okay, all of them. At Fort Hays State, it's a master's in professional studies, is what they call it. Okay. But it was all criminal justice courses, of course.
Okay. And then the one that you had mentioned that you did, it was more schooling, but it was for
command school.
Yes, command school. So what is that like?
So there are several command schools that they target, they educate. Not always young, but up and coming, kind of going to be our leadership type things. Three big ones are Northwestern's one, Southern Police Institute at Louisville, University of Louisville, and then the other one's the National Academy through the FBI. And I've always wanted, like anybody that's in this for a while, especially in administration, like they want to do one of those because it's just a phenomenal program, right? So I chose Northwestern and really liked it. Learned a lot from some experts in the field.
Very cool. Okay, so then back to my original question that I had before I got sidetracked on the education thing, because I'm a big education guy, and I think that you can never unlearn something, right? Yeah. And if you're in this constant progression of learning and then applying what you've learned, it doesn't have to be a university necessarily, but that's where they specialize on certain stuff. So, when you were were you the director for that? Did you say?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So as the director, that's a big responsibility. And with that transition from doing what you were doing before and then everything that you had mentioned, what to you is like one of the biggest challenges when it comes to that?
So one of the biggest challenges is just wrapping my mind around the administrative law end of it rather than criminal law. Because even though in my role as director there, and by statute, I had to be a sworn law enforcement officer, we didn't do criminal law. We don't do criminal law. We do Training Act violations. Our investigators look into that, and it's through the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act that we follow to take those certification actions. So that was a whole different world, getting out of the criminal element and into the administrative end of it. I liked the challenge. It was good. I had great staff. I've always had just super fortunate to work with good people that, they're mission focused and they're fun to be around, right? So I had that at Seapost. I was there for 3.5 years, and it's really while I was there. And the other challenge was that it's no longer a local government that you are a part of. It's the state government. The Seapost is a non-cabinet executive branch agency. And so all of the 12 commissioners that I reported to were governor appointees. And so navigating the waters of budget through both the Senate and the House and testifying on bills either for or against, those were all new challenges at that point.
Yeah, it just became political, right? I mean, we don't like to say that because everybody gives politics a bad word, but you're into policy making, and then, of course, you're having to go and represent every law enforcement officer across the state, really, basically, right? Yeah. And then, depending upon what direction they may or may not want to go per bill, then you're there to say, hey, whoa, this is good for us. This is not good for us. Was there anything that you were frustrated with during that time? I said challenge, but I'm looking at asking to me, I think in some instances, things don't necessarily go the way you want them to go, right? Mm-hmm. So was there ever a point where you were just kind of frustrated with that process and how policing then became political? Mm-hmm. I'm putting words in your mouth because you're not saying, you didn't say it was political. I'm saying it is because of the way I would view it, but that just kind of muddies the water of the straightforward. I'm here to serve. I'm here to protect. I'm here to make sure that be involved in community policing. The things that we've talked about today.
Yeah. Not necessarily, and I didn't get everything that we always wanted. So don't get me wrong, but it wasn't necessarily a frustration in that, but there was frustrations in the timing of all of that. Certain areas or departments, it doesn't feel like bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like, if you could just release and let us do what our mission is, that would be great. I do understand checks and balances. I get that. We need those. But sometimes it can be a little excessive.
Yeah. So when we talk politics, I'll change it to say frustration with bureaucracy. So yes. Okay. We're there. Okay. So then from there, you were there for a few years. Was it something that you decided, hey, I'm going to take a different path at this point in time? Because surely after 20 years and all that, you're looking at the potential to retire if you wanted to. Couldn't you?
No, I'm still younger, mid-20s.
Okay,
no.
Yeah. I mean, but see, okay, let me clarify. Yeah. Okay, retirement doesn't always mean an age. It could also be length of service. So correct. I'm thinking, so many years as a police officer and 20 years as a chief and stuff. I know that there's probably like a window there where if you wanted to,
sure,
you could, right? Or
not mathematically right now, right?
Lance, you don't know what you're talking about.
No, I am close. You do know what you're talking about. I am close. So it was really during my 3.5 years as director at Seapost that I really got to know the administration at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center a lot better. When I tell people about that, I said I tell them I got to see the machine. Yeah. The machine is incredible. At any point, we have 120, 130 basic academy students at some point in their journey in basic training. And that's just basic training. We have continuing ed, those 40 hours a year that officers need. We trained 15,000 last year in continuing ed alone. So it is a machine. And I saw it, and CPost and KLETC are kind of sister agencies, In fact, we're the same agency a long time ago, before it was smart to really kind of branch them due to their mission. And so I saw that, and I, both in leaving Hesston and leaving CPost, which I did just this last January to get on at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, both of those I realized that I'm never going to be able to say, hey, I've got this where I want it, now I can leave. It's just, I've got this better. There's more work to do. Good's the enemy of great.
Yeah.
And so I felt that in both positions, that we did some good things, but someone else can do that too, And so obviously a good friend of mine and coworker, and Chris Eilert, and I know he's been here with you.
Yeah.
Glad to see that he got the job, and he's moving things forward.
Yeah. 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 So then that's kind of plays into what you're saying as far as, passing the baton.
Yeah.
Serving for a time, contributing your time, talents, and gifts, and then that becomes somebody else's. They get to pick up where you left off and then continue on the mission, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of law enforcement as a whole, right? Because you have, there reaches an age in with people that you're not going to be running after the bad guy anymore, So you're then leaving with that younger generation that's coming up to do the same thing that you did, has the same mission you did. So you're at Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center now.
Yes.
I just want to dig into that.
Okay.
What does a day in the life of an individual who has been hired to be a police officer? They go through this. Everybody has to go through this training, right?
Yeah.
So what is a typical day for someone who's in those shoes or considering maybe being a law enforcement? What does that look like?
So it's very structured as far as the basic academy. So the overall 30,000 foot view, and by statute, the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, located just outside of Schroeder, is the training academy. However, we have what we call satellite academies throughout the state, mainly bigger agencies. Wichita, Sedgwick County has their own basic, Topeka, Lawrence, Johnson County, and Kansas City, KCK. They have to teach the curriculum that we develop, and they're of course free to add on their policies, procedures, geography, whatever they want to. But 14 weeks of structured curriculum that they all do, and so every day's we start a new class every 3 weeks, and we graduate a class after 14. And so that's why the machine never stops, right? It's kind of like the mail.
Yeah.
Every day. So one thing that I really think that we are cutting edge on in Kansas, especially, is how we are managing officers. We realize the stresses. We realize the resilience it takes and the toll it can take, right? So when I started in law enforcement, you never had these classes. You never had spiritual wellness. You never had a class on financial wellness. You never had a class on how to retire in happiness, resiliency. And these are all things that we've embraced and we've had for a long while now, right? And also embrace hey, it's not just basic training, but what's your next step? What's your next step? All the way through the career. And so really proud to be a part of that organization. The other thing that a new candidate can expect is not a militaristic environment. We don't square our corners when we walk around down the halls. People aren't yelled at. You're not chastised for not making your bed right, right? It's laid back, but it's business.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm really proud on, and it wasn't that way when I went through, is that we've got away from those siloed learning, that siloed education where, okay, today we're going to talk about high risk stops. Today we're going to talk about pursuits, then high risk stops. Then maybe 2 weeks later we talk about, how to take somebody in custody safely. Well, now that's not how it works in the world, right? Yeah. It starts with a call, leads to a pursuit, then a high risk stop, and then you take them and that's all one scenario.
Yeah.
And so we've got away from those silos and blending learning across all classes.
Maybe to give them the ability to think critically about what might transpire. Like you said, so if I understand you correctly, when you talk about silo, what you're saying is this is the curriculum we're going to teach and learn today.
Yes.
This is the one tomorrow, but all of this is fluid. Because
Absolutely.
One doesn't necessarily lead to the next. Not every situation is the same.
Yeah.
So then is there a lot of as far as a candidate, is there an environment where there is a lot of questions that these people have, and then you've been an instructor, correct?
No,
just director of program.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so are the instructors then encouraged to have that open conversation and dialogue with officers that are incoming, so that way it gives them the ability to develop a thinking process of sorts?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Some people will call, even other states would contact us and say something like, well, how many hours are you teaching de-escalation in basic academy? We really don't have a way to measure that. And it sounds funny that way. Back in the day, I would have had a 2-hour block, 3-hour block of de-escalation. Now we're talking de-escalation, the concepts, teaching the concepts, doing the hands-on in scenarios. That could mean a domestic violence situation. It could mean a dog has got out and really ticked off a neighbor situation. Across everything, right? You may have to de-escalate on a traffic stop, on an anything. And so breaking down those silos, I think it's important for the future.
And then does that aid? Is that kind of like infusing a culture? Like a different culture of policing then, because of what you're saying is with de-escalation, all the different variables that could happen. It's almost like you're teaching de-escalation through
Absolutely. And if you look at the history of American policing, we've been through different eras. Still kind of in that community policing era, but before that it was an era called the professional era of policing. That was a different beast. It was mainly white males that were police officers, and it was mainly people that had just got out of the military because they were big, they could handle themselves. That's apparently what was wanted or needed back then.
Follow orders, the whole thing.
Follow orders.
Yes.
It is never more important than it is today, and it will just become more and more important that we train officers with that critical thinking skill to problem solve. Just because a policy says you can do something doesn't mean it really is going to solve the problem. Yeah. So it's very important.
Something that I talk with a lot of officers about in the past, who've been on the program, when I ask the question, and I'm just going to kind of throw this one at you, policing has changed, right? Mm-hmm. There used to be a point where they had so many applications they couldn't sort through them, and then with the way things have kind of changed, public opinion, maybe there's been some situations that people just get a very small, clip of with this digital age that we have, and everybody having these, so there might be something that really might either be misconstrued or maybe be bad or on somebody's behalf that shouldn't have done what they did, whatever the case may be. But then it became where it was almost impossible to get an application at times.
Yeah.
As far as being the director of programming, is there something that's been noticed and then actively trying to address that?
Yeah. I think a couple things. I think our focus on a career and knowing that officers are people and have needs that we need to address, their mental health, fighting burnout, how hard it is on the family at home, those sorts of things that we're catching on to. I actually had studied some of Kansas's law enforcement officer rates of employment when I was at Seapost. I every 3 months or so I'd do a check and run and that sort of thing. And we were really at a low of about 8,100 officers in Kansas shortly after a big event in Minnesota, where all officers, for whatever reason, are painted with the same brush as an individual that got what he deserved in the end. Yeah. Why that is, I don't know. I mean, if I hear of a doctor in Florida misprescribing somebody medication, I don't think that of my doctor, Yeah. But that's not what the world we live in. And, knock on wood, there's been some national cases of just as bad. Probably haven't received quite as much press, but just as bad. And that number has then been climbing. And when I left, it was about 8,350. So about 250 officers different in a, relatively small state. But I think that plays a lot into it. I mean, if a young person wants to go to their family and say, hey, I want to be an officer. What? Why would you want to do that? You want to work nights, you want to work weekends, you want to eventually have a family and miss a concert or a ball game or, it's a tough sell.
Yeah. And it's a service-oriented job. So it's like, I can't put myself in your shoes, but to put myself in an officer's shoes, it just makes me think, there's a lot that has to be dealt with all the time. I mean, when that call comes in, that's your job. You don't have a choice. It doesn't matter whether you want to be there that day. I mean, it's we talk about all these things, accidents and people at their worst moments and showing up and there's confrontation of family, or even like what you were talking about where you're dealing with things that the normal person, everyday person couldn't fathom, when it comes to like the example that you gave with the young people that were hurt. That's oftentimes just your responsibility. That's your job. And I don't think that people can really conceptualize, myself included, what that does to a person on a daily basis, right?
Absolutely.
Just constantly. And so that's why when you said that there's a real emphasis placed on mental health so how do you feel that policing has changed over the time from when you first started to today? I mean, you hinted on a few things, but in your capacity, director of programs, so it's like you get to make recommendations, obviously, and are responsible for what we teach these people, right? Like, where do we place an emphasis? What is important? In the past, it might have been something that was different because the culture was different, versus today the culture is different, and obviously you want to train these people, equip them, give them their best foot forward, change the culture that needs to be changed, improve on things that in the past, so what's something that sticks out in your mind and that you could give the audience about how policing has changed over the last 20 to 30 years?
So we need problem solvers. That wasn't always the case. Far too often, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we'd go on a call, we'd put a Band-Aid on it. Didn't stop the bleeding, didn't stop the wound, didn't heal it, none of that. We've learned more and more, and it's really with working with, the Peelian principles behind community policing that we've realized that we need to make a greater impact, and it comes through problem solving. It takes a unique individual. That's the other reason why I think I think generationally plays into it as well. Back in 30, 40 years ago, when I started law enforcement, I started with the intent that that's what I was going to do till I retire. It's not necessarily the case in the newer generations. Now, there are a lot of better attributes that they bring to the team. So I'm not just saying, hey, they don't get it or something like that, but you didn't have the service-oriented folks in in us, in our parents' generation, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you did mention, and I know I read somewhere that you do adjunct training. So not only are you doing what you're doing, but then you also teach classes. So you had mentioned a couple places, but just a refresher. Where do you teach classes currently, and what class do you teach?
So I'm currently at the University of Kansas, and it's in their new program. It's an asynchronous online program, and I have taught a very general introduction to criminal justice. And I enjoy that one because 80% of the class are not criminal justice majors. So that's been interesting for me to see through their work how they view the world. And a lot of psychology majors, sociology, several other. And here coming up, pretty soon I will be teaching a theory and history of criminal justice, which I kind of geek out on. That's always been a subject that I've liked. Over the years, so I'm just at KU right now. Over the years, gosh, I've taught everything from terrorism. I wrote and taught forensic science. That's really kind of a hidden love of mine, the science and behind the forensics. Juvenile delinquency. Can't even name them all.
Really?
But terrorism. Did I say terrorism?
Yeah, you said that. Yeah. I was going to say, I need to take a class from you. It's interesting to me that it's like I was almost looking for an answer to say I taught this class and then it was transferable over, but you've really just spread your wings when it comes to teaching different subject matter, and then to think that as teaching those classes, you definitely have to have an in-depth knowledge. So you're just continuing to collect, even though you're going and teaching a class to a student, you have to have an in-depth knowledge of that class itself. So as you go along, you just continue to pick up all kinds of knowledge that's applicable and that you can give to the youth. What's the best thing about being an instructor? A college professor? What, you mentioned something about seeing all these different, but at the end of the day, what's like one of the best things about being?
So it goes back to that student perspective, that wide variety, and whatever the cliche saying is, like the teacher learns more from the students than the student. I seriously do, because it tells me what that generation of student, what lens they see the world through. And sometimes it's let's reel her on back. Have you considered this? Have you considered that? And just to get them to grow. But I found that I grow. And so that's where that scratching that itch comes in on still learning and progressing and being challenged.
Okay, so what does the future for Doug look like?
Future for Doug, I don't know. I'm enjoying life. We're newly empty nesters, so that's a new phase. Kids are grown up. I love doing what I'm doing right now. I can see me doing it for another 12, 15 years or so, good Lord willing. And just continue looking for those challenges, continue trying to be that influence that I want to be.
Yeah, and hopefully be where you're at to help just train up future law enforcement officers every day that choose to serve. Because that really, I think, would you say that's a common theme of all the people that show up to be a police officer? I mean, that stay in it, especially for a career. That's big. That's big. I mean, even in my position now, I'm thinking the other ways I can serve. Because I think once that's in your blood, it's in there. You just have to do it.
You just have to do it.
So one thing's for sure, Doug will continue to serve.
I will.
Whatever he does. Okay. Well, we are coming to the end of the program. We could talk for a lot longer, I know. And we will. off camera. We will, folks. But just one thing I like to do when wrapping up the program is just to give the guests the last word to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of everybody listening. It can be about anything that you want to talk about. Go ahead. You got the floor, Doug.
Well, I appreciate you listening. Hopefully, you see a little more in depth through a life and career of a police officer. That's really my intent, to try and bring that out. And I even challenge your listeners, challenge you to say thank you to your local officers and see what you can do for them. And also, they're not the only ones that serve out there. We can all take our turn doing that. So thank you, sir.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the program, Doug. I just want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of HCTalk. As always, I was your host, Lance Gormley, and our guest on the program was Doug Schroeder, who is the Director of Programs at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center.
You got it.
Doug.
Yes, thank you.